Hi everybody, this will be a quick video discussing how to export out a 3D model from Maya and then import this into Unreal. So I have Maya open and I have my different assets. When you're modeling in Maya, you can model individual pieces, but when we're ready to export, we need to collapse or combine all the objects together. So the easiest way to do that is just to select all those parts. They're all individual right now. But select all those parts and then go over to the modeling toolkit and choose combine. Okay, so that combines it into one base form. So the main thing we want to do is we can combine all of these individual parts together. And I'm keeping the parts separate that needs to animate separately. So here's the base and I have three different varying size targets here. The thing to remember here is I need to delete the history because the history is saved in the file. So I want to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. That gets rid of any extra group that's associated with this object. So with these other three pieces selected, I can go Edit, Delete by Type, History, and that clears out any extra history. That's really important before we move forward. So I've already got everything positioned in the center of the grid, which is where we want to export from. And I've also, if I can move the individual pieces out of the way and I'll show you. Each piece, the pivot point has been moved. So if I hit the D key, I can move that pivot point around. And what I can do is hold down the V key, V for vertex, and snap that in the vertical axis to the bottom of this base piece. This is my target base. If I hit the D key again to get out of pivot mode, now I can snap this pivot point to the center of the grid. So if I hold down the X key, that snaps to the grid points. And now this object is ready to export. So the last thing I would do before I export this object, in case there's any transforms or anything that are on the object, I want to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. That makes sure it exports properly. So I'm going to move all these back to the center of the grid. So I want to have my target base and then three different size or height target sections. The other thing I've done here is I've added 4 materials. So one base material for the metal parts and then an individual material for the center of each of these targets. So I have a light whiter color, medium gray, and a darker gray. So I'm doing this in Maya so that way when I import this into Unreal, it will have 4 different materials that I don't have to set up. I can go make some simple adjustments. So I just set up some simple Lambert materials. I created a new material. I came in here, renamed it, and then over here on the right, I changed the color to a base color. I'll actually define the base color and material attributes in Unreal. But what I can go ahead and do is set up 4 different materials and apply them to specific faces. So what I did was came in here, went into face mode, double clicked on those, and if I wanted to change it to this material, I would right click and choose Assign Material to Selection. So that way I have different materials for the different parts, make it a little bit more dynamic in Unreal. So when I'm ready to export, what I'm going to do is select each individual piece and export them individually. So this is the target base. So I'm going to go File, Export Selection. And I'm going to find my folder, Target Demo. And I already have files out here saved. So I'm going to save it out of FBX for each section here. Base, medium target, small target, tall target. I'm going to save this out as an FBX file. The only thing I'm changing here is open up the Geometry tab and make sure Smoothing Groups is selected. Alright, then I would choose Export Selection. I've already got my 4 pieces exported. But I would go to each individual section, the short frame target, File, Export Selection, same thing with the medium and the tall. Export each one individually. Alright, so in Unreal, that's the export process. So in Unreal, all I'm really going to do is import in those 4 FBX files. I've already got some folders here to show you for reference. What I'm going to do is go to my main folder, and I'm going to right click and choose new folder, and we'll do targets _2 since I already have a targets 1 folder. Within my target subfolder, I'm going to go find my target demo FBX files and just drag them into that targets folder. So I'm going to drag them into the content browser down here. In Unreal, that's going to pull up my FBX import. I'm not going to make any changes. I'm going to choose import all. Let it sit for a second. But what that's going to do is build a material and import all of those assets in. So I've already imported these in. I'll come back and I'll show you how to reset up the materials here in a second. But when you import assets in, it may not match the scale of your Unreal file. So if I hit play, this is the size of those targets as they come in as default. So they're really small. They're about 10 times smaller than what I want. This is the scaled up version of them. So this is the size that I want. This is the original size as it comes in. Jump back to Maya. So in Maya, if you model your objects roughly to the size of the grid, then it's going to be about 10 times larger as you need to scale the X, Y, and Z coordinates up from Maya into Unreal. Now I could come into Maya and scale it up in Maya, but it's just as easy to scale it up in Unreal. So when I am dragging an object in, like this base, it's going to be really small. So just a small little object. So if I come over here and I set up my scale, if I type in 10 for scale X, scale Y, and scale Z, that will roughly be the size of what I'm looking for. That all depends on how large you modeled your object in Maya. Alright, so another good thing to do as I'm importing, I'm using these targets as interactable shooting targets. So what I'm going to do is actually build a blueprint for each one of these 4 base FBX files that I can do the scaling in the blueprint instead of having to manually scale it every time. So what I'm going to do is right click, choose blueprint class, go to actor, and type in BP target base underscore, let's do underscore A because I already have a target base already set up here in a previous folder. So here's my blueprint. I'll pull it over to the right screen here. And what I'm going to do is drag my target base object into this blueprint. That'll put it in the center, but it is really small. So I'm just going to come in here in the blueprint scale X, Y, and Z and type in 10 for each one of those 3. So that way that's going to be the proper scale of this target base object. Let's hit compile. I'm going to close that temporarily. I'm going to create a new blueprint class, another actor. We'll call this one BP underscore target small a. There you go. I'm going to open that up and I'm going to drag my small target into this blueprint. Repeat, I'm going to scale this up 10 by 10 by 10. The pivot point for this one, I've moved it so as you import it in, it'll rotate based off of the pivot as long as when you've exported it from Maya, the pivot point and the object are at the center of the grid. There you go, so compile to get that one in there. So now if I drag in my BP target base, that's the right size, or my even BP target small, and that's going to be the right size. So it's better to start with blueprints than to come in here and have to scale it every time you drag in an object. So last thing I want to mention is move this in and I'll show you the material. So zoom in over here so you can hopefully see the object. Each object has a material. I have a material base. If I double click that material base, this is what the material will look like coming out of Maya and importing into Unreal. I have a parameter. It's a vector parameter that has 3 values associated with color. So it's a gray value right now. This is the base gray value, so I'm going to call this like the metal. So if I add a little bit of, a blue hue to it, a little bit lighter of a value, click OK, and let's click Apply. Let it update. That should update that blue material. Okay, so it's now a lighter blue. You can take this another step forward and add a metallic and a roughness value to make it look more metallic. If I drag off a metallic and type in constant, that's just a value from 0 to whatever value you choose. But metallic is how reflective something is. So let's put that up to like 0.8. And if you let that reload, you'll see that that's now kind of a metallic shape to it. Okay. Put a value of 1. Pretty reflective. Okay. I'm also going to drag off from roughness and add another constant there. And then with this constant, maybe I'll do a 0.3 for roughness. So higher value closer to 1 for metallic means it's more reflective. A lower value closer to 0 for roughness means it's more shiny or shinier. So that'll look pretty good, look pretty metallic. Let's apply that. And that'll get applied to anything with that material associated with it. So it looks pretty metallic. And I'm going to come to, I think it's going to be, let's go back and look at which one. So that is in Maya. I have this material set up, and that's going to be my center 2. So it's going to be my darker gray value. So back in Unreal, center 2, we'll double click that. And then we can do whatever we want to. I just kind of want a different color or value so that I can tell the target's a different color than the base of it. But I can do something a little different. Maybe I'll make this a emissive glowing texture. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click off of base color from the vector parameter or the parameter value. And instead I'm going to drag off from that parameter and choose a multiply. So multiply node. And then I'm going to sync that multiply up to emissive. And then, so the parameter color goes into A for multiply. And for B, I'm going to drag out and just choose another constant. So this will be a value. Okay. So let's change my parameter color to something more primary, like a red, bright red color. So this will make the color and emissive. Oops, kind of pink, so that's fine. We'll do pink. And we're going to add the emissive or glow value by taking this multiply constant value, crank that up to something much larger, 50. Let that load, and it should look like it is going to be glowing. So let's apply. And as that finishes, it's going to update that on the material. So now I have this pink glowing target for me to shoot there. So that's how if I go over here to these other ones again, you can see I already have 3 materials, one that's green emissive glowing, one that's red emissive, and one that's blue emissive. And then my metal material is on behind that. So that's how we import in models from Maya, the proper way to export out of Maya, and the proper way to import into Unreal. That'll wrap up this video. The next video we'll talk about how to set up targets within Unreal so that when you can shoot them, it knocks the target down through animation.